Good afternoon. So thank you to Ron, the committee, to Reverend President Lang for the invitation to come and speak with you. I hope we have a good time. They've asked me to do a lot of hours of standing up here. I don't have that many hours of content, so I'll talk a little bit about how I'd like for this to go internally amongst us as we get going. But I want to tell you a little bit about me, just to kind of humanize myself to you, give you a little bit of my story, background, and perhaps a sense of why I'm interested in the things I'm talking about today. So, some of the most simple ways I would define myself is that I'm a father, a husband, I'm a drummer, and I'm a former atheist, and all of those will hang together in a certain way. So, just like President Lang, a little of my family. This is my oldest daughter, Annabelle. She's 6 in first grade. My youngest daughter, Daphne, she's coming up on 15 months. And we had a short trip this summer to Rapid City, where our Bethany's grandparents, that's my wife there, they were able to meet Daphne for the first time. So other than in Michigan, the only family we have outside of the state is in Racine, Wisconsin. One great-grandparent there, and then in Rapid City, 2 great-grandparents there. So most of the time you'll find us when we've got free moments going back home. Bethany and I come from the same congregation. My father-in-law, her dad, is a pastor of, I think, about 33 years in the same congregation there in Flushing. I think Ron was just saying he's 33 years in his ministry. It's rather unheard of in the LCMS these days. So the commitment is amazing. He'll be retiring from there shortly. Drums and music are really kind of a passion for me. They are sort of what got me started on this pathway to ministry, theology, teaching. I've been playing drums since I could sit in a chair. I grew up in a house where my dad had a little kiddie drum set that he was purchased for him when he was a little kid. And he never really got into it, but it was there in the basement of the house I was born in, and when I was able to start smacking around on it, I did, and kind of fell in love from there. And I was blessed by a great public education system that by about 4th grade I was able to get into organized music and never stopped. By the time I was in high school, I was playing in some sort of ensemble all year round associated with school, and on top of that, trying to put bands and so on together outside of school. My favorite sort of music is progressive rock. So my favorite band, Dream Theater, some of you know of them, prior generation. For those of you who don't know Dream Theater, would be Rush, Yes, Genesis, and so on, that genre. My dad got me interested in music somewhat of this sort. I would say originally he'd be more of a Van Halen, Journey sort of guy, and I appreciate those a lot, but for whatever reason, my ears have just drawn me to the more complicated, melodic, progressive, virtuosic style of people like Dream Theater, so I follow them really closely, and I've tried to model some of my own playing off of what I hear and those sorts of influences among others. While I was in high school, I became an atheist. I grew up in a nominally Catholic family. We were Catholic really in name only, practicing the faith and kind of handing it down and transmitting it wasn't really a part of my growing up experience. We moved to my dad's hometown when I was 6 in first grade. And in 2nd grade, I started Catholic catechism classes, CCD, on Wednesday nights, all the way up through 8th grade when I was confirmed in the Catholic Church. Because we didn't go to church regularly, and this is really my only exposure to the faith, I walked away from that process knowing nothing about the significance of Jesus. And I don't say that to criticize the teachers and the mentors that I had in Catholic catechism, because I think they were deeply wonderful people who left an impact on me. And I was just more drawn to the historical stories and things of that interest. But by about the time I got through late junior high and into high school, church for me was drudgery And I didn't want to go. So I had the freedom after confirmation to decide, what do I want to do? And I said, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. But I needed to justify that. So my first ticket out was presented to me in freshman biology class, the theory of evolution. And I said, well, this just makes more sense of reality as we know it. And so this religion thing is kind of no more. I don't need that anymore. And called myself an atheist from there on out. And that was my ticket out of the obligation of going to church. My parents were okay with that. I mean, what else could they do, I guess, in a sense? Since we didn't go regularly, we did show up to special occasions like, the confirmation of a sibling or weddings and funerals and so on. But otherwise, I never returned. But this music bitch from my past was kind of always with me. So by the end of high school, I was involved in a Blues Brothers cover band. It was fantastic, right? I loved it. It was entirely student-led. That's really the fruits of the music program that I came from. We had great arts and athletics. I think they were equally emphasized in my school district. And so a whole bunch of us who had already been doing things together for years in choir, wind ensemble, orchestra, and during the musicals in the spring, we put together a coordinated musical set where we wore outfits and they had dance moves, and thankfully I get to sit in the back and just be the drummer because that's totally embarrassing to me to do that stuff. So we played like 10 songs. We won a contest at my high school. We played a whole bunch of open houses or senior graduation parties. And then one of the lead singers, we rehearsed in his garage. And his mom happened to be the praise team leader at a local Lutheran congregation and heard me play drums and thought, well, this guy can hack it good enough. Let's ask him to come play. So they did. And all they had used previous to that was a little button on their keyboard. It was kind of band in the box. They'd have a drum beat going, and when they needed drum fill, they'd push a button, and that would be it. So it was a significant upgrade for them to just have a live drummer. And for me, I said, I'm an atheist, right? And they're like, yeah, we know. I said, well, okay, I'll come do this if you pay me. And so it became a semi-professional gig, and I said, based on my professional ethic, as I've been raised, I'm an atheist, but I'm not going to let that stand in the way of my work for you. I'm not going to raise questions or objections or what have you. And because I had been not steeped, but at least formed by thinking about evolution, I had scientific questions, I had philosophical objections to the faith, and so on. But I got to play with this group of musicians. All of these people were way better than me, way more experienced. They are older, so they're kind of lifting my capacity to play. And it was one of the things that I was looking for all the time in high school. And most of the dudes that I wanted to play with just wanted to smoke dope and drink. That being what it was, church music was easy compared to the things that I was interested in. But what I learned from this group was two things: how to play in a live band on a regular basis, very independently from having a director. And so I learned musicianship just by it kind of rubbing off from these really seasoned people onto me. And I'm deeply grateful for that experience because I've been able to take it then and influence others in that same regard. But also, I found a group of people who they knew I was an atheist, and I was afraid taking this gig that they were going to try to shove Jesus down my throat or beat me over the head with the Bible because atheists have no morals or something like that. And in fact, they just loved me, and they were really glad that I was there, and they encouraged me, and they were constantly trying to mention me in small ways in the thing that I loved the most, which was musicianship, and that was why I was there. They treated me as much as I didn't feel like it as an equal and a friend. So about 6 months later, I had made it clear with them that I still had objections and questions. They were like, we don't really know how to answer those. But I said, I'm looking for God to make himself real to me in a tangible way. So what I was looking for was, the audible voice. Hello, Chad. I'm real. Well, we all know that that's very rare that God does those things. Or, like write it on the wall. Hello, Chad. Here I am. See this miracle. What's up now? But he didn't do that. Instead, what I found was playing drums in this setting was different than any other experience I had. So I've already told you about some of the places I've played, musicals and wind ensembles and so on, some of these high school bands. One of them, I played in the crappiest dive bar that would let under 21s in to do their music. And it was on a stage like this, but I felt like my drum set and I were going to fall through it. And I've gone from there all the way in marching bands and playing in NFL football stadiums for state competitions and so on. So just these massively different venues and all kinds of small percussive ensembles in between. But when I sat in that drummer seat and I played for rehearsal on Thursday nights and Sunday morning, not only did I think I played better than in any other setting, but I liked it and enjoyed it more. And so the tipping point for me became this intangible, where I went to bed one night 6 months after taking the gig and said, God, I still don't know if you're real. But if you are, and these gifts and talents and this passion that I have, you created me with this, and then when I use it for you, it naturally feels like I'm playing better and I enjoy it more. Well, God, if that is your evidence, if that's kind of the convincing issue for me, well, I will give you a chance. That was my prayer. I'll give you a chance. And from that point on, everything changed. Within 6 months, I felt the call to go to seminary. I started consuming contemporary apologetics literature. As an academic now, I have some consternations about some of the methodology in that literature. But that being said, it left a mark in the moment. And I went to seminary 3 years later, so I started at the University of Michigan. I'm not a system guy. And moved on to seminary. It is what it is, right? I have lots of brothers and sisters who are systems people. It's not a hierarchy, it's not an either or, but University of Michigan, if that's what you're cheering for, yes, they're doing very well in football. I felt after my time at seminary, while I was doing this ministry, starting a congregation, and so on, I did a lot of music directorship as well, that I think I'm not sure that parish is the right fit for me. And so I just kept going toward my PhD and thought I wanted to teach. I really think that I've got a skill set and a capacity and an aptitude to do this. Was privileged to be able to test out a little bit of that under the guidance of the SEM faculty. And so my first call is actually to be a teacher at Portland. So I've got this great little world where I've got all kinds of pastoral experience prior, non-ordained, but still utterly valuable. And then I've taken a lot of my experience as an atheist and working with college students, where my ministry was aimed, into my classroom setting. So in a sense, there's a couple of things that I can't forget about my past, right? All of us have a past, and that we live out in the moment here and now. One of the things is I can't forget the fact that I used to be an outsider. And that frames the way that I do ministry, it frames the things that I'm interested in, it frames the way that I teach and try to relate to people. At Concordia, we have like 7% LCMS and maybe 30% of people at the other end of the spectrum who are either non-religious, unaffiliated, atheist, other religion. So the diversity is not something I'm too terribly uncomfortable with, because I used to be an outsider from the tradition that shapes Concordia. But also as an LCMS pastor and theologian who came in just about 20 years ago, I have no dogs in our fights. So I don't think about them the typical way. So, the worship wars that were kind of going on 10 years ago, and I have no dogs in that fight. And some of the culture wars, social issues that are going on now, I just perceive and approach them differently. And it motivates me to talk about ministry to millennials and some of this other socio-cultural stuff that influences and shapes us at a take-it-for-granted level. I'm always just wondering about that and thinking about that, and I'm driven by out of my past. Because if I look back at my own past, I shouldn't be here. my parents did not transmit a faith to me. They did not pass on the importance of being a believer, of being a religious practitioner, and all the sociological data that I know says I should be still an outsider. But I'm an insider. By the grace of God, I can't explain it any other way than God wanted me here doing this. And so I am trying to do this, and so my questions are driven by questions of my own formation. How did I become the kind of religious person I am? And what does that mean for how others are becoming the kinds of religious persons that they are, or how did we become the kind of religious people that we are? So I hope that makes a little bit of sense, gives you a little insider take on where I'm coming from, what drives me on these presentations. And I just want to say a little bit about the atmosphere for how I would like this to go. Most of my work at Concordia is with upper division students. I still teach general education. Usually it's with juniors and seniors who have to take some of our required religion courses. So in an effort to try to take the content that I have to deliver and say, look, whether you're religious or not, whatever part of the spectrum you fit on, I want this to be meaningful for you. I think there are legitimate takeaways from this content. I try to create a conversational atmosphere where people will just raise their hand and ask questions, because I assume a great number of people in my classrooms have them. So please, let this be a conversational time. I know it's a big room. There's a microphone in the back. But raise your hand. I'll just stop. Interrupt me, ask your question. I've got my content. But look, if you get me off on a tangent, I don't care. Because part of my issue as a teacher is I'm much more sensitive to what you want to know than what I have to say. I got a lot of stuff to say. I could have fit more into this, and I had to sort of restrain myself from adding more and more slides over and over again to just be lecturing you forever. I think that's kind of boring. I don't know, but I'm sensitive to my younger students in that regard. I don't want to talk at you all day. I want to have this be a conversation, because in a sense we're in this ministry together, and I don't have all the answers. So please don't save all your questions for tomorrow night's Q&A. Hit me.
What do your parents think of what happened to you?
What do my parents think? Well, I'm really privileged. I have parents that are quite proud of me, my younger sister, and my younger brother. And we know it very clearly. So, interestingly enough, part of the story I didn't share along the way was as I was growing up, my mom asked me, Chad, what do you think about being a priest? Right? Because that was our context, being in the Catholic Church. And my answer to my mom was always like, not no, but hell no. What are you talking about? Right? It was the same reaction to like, do you want to be a dental hygienist? Hell no, I don't want people's bad breath coming in my face all day. I mean, that was how I thought about it as kind of a teenager when she's asking me these sorts of things. If anybody's a dental hygienist, no offense. But I mean, so it's almost as if my mom was prophesying that I'd be doing this sort of thing. Was the voice of God speaking through? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I wouldn't dare to. But maybe. Maybe somehow, through the Spirit, she knew something I didn't. And so here I am, and they're quite proud of me. So let me add a little bit to the story then. My mom became a Lutheran after I did. She was interested in the faith. Every time we'd leave Catholic catechism, she'd pick us up on Wednesday nights. She'd be asking, what do you learn? Let me see your catechism book. There were workbooks that day, not like a small catechism like we have. At least typically. I know there are other resources. But she would ask, and she would want to see the book, and I think she had a genuine interest in Christian spirituality. But she became a Christian to marry my dad, who was a Catholic, and just sort of went through the proper order of things to do a Catholic marriage. But she really hadn't grown up with it. She had gone to church with a friend on and off in her childhood. But I think had a legitimate interest. My dad was a lapsed Catholic for a really long time. He went to private Catholic school. He was an altar boy for quite some time. And I think he made a similar move to me, that when he got to the age to be able to decide for himself, he disengaged. He didn't give up his beliefs, but he was no longer practicing. Since then, my sister got married about 2 or 3 years into the time I was at SEM. So we're at the rehearsal in a Catholic church, the parish where we grew up, and it's a Friday night, and my dad comes up to me after the rehearsal's over and he says, "Chad, I want to participate fully in this wedding mass tomorrow. I want to be able to go to communion, but I know that means I need to go to confession," as is typical practice in the Catholic Church. And why he came to me to ask me this question, I don't know. I'm his kid, right? He's asking me for religious advice. I felt kind of off-putting and out of order. But I said, "Dad, the priest is still here. I suspect that he wants you there too if you want to be there. If you need to go do confession, go talk to him," right? This was a bold, vulnerable moment for my dad, but I'm not sure. I've had the chance to witness those only a few times in my life. And he went. And he started becoming a regular attender back in the Catholic Church, and still is a regular attender to this day, and served for quite a long time as an usher every single Sunday. As a vicar, I preached for the baptism of my grandparents, my mom's parents. That's also very odd and feels quite out of order, but was also, a deep privilege. And my grandparents still worship at the same Lutheran church I grew up at with my mom every Sunday. And then my sister and brother are, I would say, sociologically normal. My sister has 2 children, and the only reason she has expressed an interest in religion is because she has kids, which is quite typical. My brother is still unmarried, has been living with his girlfriend for about 8 years. I think marriage is in the works fairly soon. But that being what it is, he finds no interest in this sort of spirituality that the rest of my family has at least got some connection to. So I don't know if that entirely answers your question. You'd have to ask them what they think. But I think they would say we're proud, because that's what they've told me.
What does your brother do?
My brother is a computer programmer who works for an avionics company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So he basically does a lot of the computer systems for the company, has government contracts. So he can't know what the company makes because it's above his security clearance. So that's what he does. But he works in a very Christian part of the country. Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the west side is very Dutch Reformed. So that's where Calvin College is, if you're familiar. Yeah, thanks for the questions. Any others? Thanks for getting me off on a tangent already. This is the way I like to work.
I, like you, left high school as an evolutionist.
Yep.
And actually, when I went to college at Concordia River Forest, that position was not necessarily dispelled. It wasn't until I became a teacher in Florida that I encountered a guy from the University of Florida who was a creationist.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what, and over the past 40 years now, there have been a lot of creationistic resources out there. What was most helpful to you in coming back?
Yeah, so not creationism.
No.
It's bad science. I think it's playing according to the rules of according to someone else's rules, not the rules of theology. I think we try to prove the Bible true in a court whom we give higher authority than Scripture. I think that's the way it works academically. So I think that's troublesome for us and ought to be. The way that I tend to handle this issue is more from a philosophy of science perspective. So a deeply influential couple of scientists, Michael Polanyi, who was a physical chemist, member of the British Royal Society, wrote a handful of books about epistemology.